Welcome to MNN. You know, this is our
Thank
new
you.
facilities. We've been in here maybe, I don't know, about a year now.
Really?
Yeah. So it's
Pretty
really
nice.
quite good. Maybe you people could start thinking about maybe doing some programming over
Sure.
here, you know.
Sure.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting story you people have to tell. And I do thank you for that gathering the other night.
Oh,
with
okay.
Irish
I
Chang
hope you
and
enjoyed the time.
No, it was
And
really.
we have a very good guest that
Yeah,
day. So
that's right.
very special guest.
Yes, welcome very much to Conversations. Well, it's a pleasure to welcome two gentlemen to the program that we're going to be talking about the events that took place in China in December and of 1937 and January and February of 1938, and that being called the Nanjing Massacre.
That's right.
Which is something that they're certainly interested in, the history of which they're interested in having people be aware of. And if I may, on my far left, I'd like to introduce Dr. Howard Shing. And he is he's a Chinese Army orphan.
Orphan, yes.
And he had many personal experiences that he's going to want to address. And Dr. Howard, welcome very, very much to Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
And on my immediate left is Sam Chen, and he is the chairman of the Alliance in Memory of the victims of the Nanjing. We think of Nanking, but it's Nanjing Massacre.
Now, right.
Nanking Massacre. And Sam Chen, welcome very, very much to Conversations and
Sure.
to Manhattan Network.
Thank you.
Maybe you could, Sam. There's a short memory on the part of many people. Maybe you could. The event has been called to public attention by the recent best-selling book that that Irish Chang has put out, The Rape of Nanking. But maybe you could spell out a little bit for us what the events were that was leading up to this actually almost, it's a massacre or almost Holocaust proportions of what happened to the Chinese people.
That's right.
In the winter of 1937 in Nanjing. What was the background to that, if you could?
The background is in 1937. Actually, it was yesterday, July 7th. Japan invaded China.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they started invading China before, but on that day, China declared the war against Japan's invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, Japan started full scale, sent a lot of troops to China, and in December 13, they take over the Nanjing, at that time called Nanjing, which was the then capital of China.
That was the capital then
Yes.
of China, and they had been up in set up Manchukuo, and they'd been to Shanghai, and they've been to where it's now Beijing.
They took over the Manchuria in 1932.
Right, set up Manchukuo.
Yeah, Manchukuo,
Yeah,
right.
Manchukuo,
They
yeah.
took over Manchuria
Mhm.
that time, and then formed a Manchukuo.
Mhm.
So they think it's a separate country, so they take part from China
Mhm.
and form a separate country there.
And if I may, and then they did move.
They moved down south.
Down south to
Right.
what was then the capital. We think
Right.
of Beijing or Peking
Yeah,
as the capital, but it was
right.
Nanking was the capital of China
Right.
at that time, and they moved on
To Chongqing.
on to Nanking in the
Yeah.
winter, December of 1937.
Actually, they started to take Shanghai first, right
Yes.
before Nanjing,
Uh-huh.
which Shanghai took 3 months for them to take over Shanghai, because Shanghai, they faced resistance from the people in Shanghai. They didn't expect that.
Mhm.
So when they moved to inland to attack Nanjing, they was like mad dog. So when they conquered, they took over the Nanjing, they started mass killing, which that's what happened. And that day was December 13, which we mark as Nanjing Massacre.
Mhm.
And
beginning of what took
that's
over,
beginning. Yeah, that's the first day.
a few months
And
period there.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of things happening before Nanjing,
Mhm.
but there wasn't a Western journalist cover it, so
Mhm.
a lot of people doesn't know anything about it. And the real story come up from a journalist of New York Times,
Mhm.
Miss Durding,
Mhm.
which he was very young at that time. That probably one of his first assignment, and he saw a lot of things happening. He started write the story to cover that, and that appeared on the cover page, the front page of New York Times. That was the first time people know what's happening in China.
Yes, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to let Dr. Howard talk about some of the personal experiences he's able to recount and so forth, and the horror of what took place there, which has to be remembered. I'm just curious, in a certain sense, war is a hellish business in a certain sense, and terrible atrocities take place in war, particularly in the 20th century with civilian casualties, and used to be wars would fight in the meadow between warriors, but they became to increasingly involve citizens in Europe and elsewhere in the world. I mean, but the atrocities or the massacre in Nanjing, was that characteristic of the Japanese experiences in Shanghai and other parts of China that they had done, or much less up in Manchuria, or was there something particularly ferocious, if that's the right term, about what took place in Nanjing? Had there been a change in terms of, let's say, particularly at a policy level, on the part of the imperial government of Japan when they got to Nanjing, or had that been characteristic of what they had done earlier before they arrived in Nanjing?
Well, before they arrived in Nanjing, they already have a lot of damage done. They kill a lot of people.
Yeah.
The reason the Nanjing massacre becomes such a brutal symbol of the Japanese, barbarian action is because they killed over 300,000 people in a short period of time of like a 2.5 months.
Yeah, right.
And the way they killed it is what makes the whole world really, really, understand what Japan, they was very surprised by the action. It's not a very civilized way of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think the reason of they doing such a action in such a short period of time, like I mentioned before, they got a big resistance in Shanghai, so they kind of really get really angry.
Yes.
And that's one reason. The second reason is Nanjing was the capital of the China then, and they think by really doing a strong action in Nanjing will make the Chinese people fear and make their next movement easier.
It wasn't a matter of some rogue soldiers on a rampage. It was a matter of policy on the part of the Japanese government.
Yes.
They had it in Nanjing, and we're going to talk about it, Nanjing. But they hadn't manifest such, from your perspective, the Chinese perspective, such barbarity in Shanghai.
Yes.
Earlier, you said there was resistance, but they hadn't demonstrated that sort of pattern of behavior in Shanghai before they marched on Nanjing, or not? That's what I was trying to get at. What had been their attitude before the massacre of Nanjing in December of 1937 toward the Chinese people, that they were moving with their army into China?
The Shanghai got a lot of damage also, but it did take 3 months before they took over Shanghai. So a lot of people already moved out of the city, and they could get away with it somehow. And,
but you didn't have a massacre of Shanghai?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
No, there's a killing, but not the massacre like it happened in Nanjing, no.
We could, Dr. Howard, maybe you could talk a little, because you're an orphan, a Chinese army orphan, and maybe you could talk a little you had personal experiences there, and when you say Chinese army, who made up the Chinese army? Who was the core of the resistance against the Japanese, and what was the reality in terms of the resistance on the part of the Chinese people in some military organized way to the Japanese invasion? Or maybe you could bring it into your own personal experience.
Most every people hate the Japanese invade China.
Yes.
They join the army by themselves.
Yes.
Like my father was a physician in the hospital.
Physician.
Medical doctor in the hospital.
As you are yourself.
Right. Yeah. Especially he is a surgeon.
Yes. As you are, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm working in Massacre Medical Center.
Yes.
And by that time, he take care of the warm people and the soldiers. So he fears the Japanese kill so many Chinese.
Yes.
The surgeons, the armies need him, the government need him. He quit the hospital job, joined the army physician.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
like
we
this.
have a photograph that we will be showing.
That's the last picture when he left home.
Oh, yeah.
By that time, I was 3 years old.
Is that you then in the middle?
Yes, the middle is me.
That is your father
Right.
and
That's
your
the
mother?
father and my mother.
And
This,
you
right.
as a youngster.
I was
Yes.
3 years old.
Yes, I see.
This is the last picture.
So you were born in 1934?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when he left,
Yes.
my mother, I have grandmother,
Yeah.
grandmother,
Yes.
cried, but he wants to go.
Yeah.
Then that's the last picture. When he joined army.
Army, would this be the army of the
National
support
National
national army.
Kuomintang, right? Okay, right. Okay.
The army is
Yeah.
going to Shanghai, support
Yeah.
Shanghai,
Yeah.
but it not reach Shanghai. The Japanese find out because they have the doctors has a Red Cross.
Yes.
According to the international law,
Mhm.
not supposed to be to destroy the medical service area.
Of course not.
Right.
Yeah, right.
But they did. My father whole body destroyed. All surgeons, doctors, and wounded soldiers all destroyed.
Yeah.
That's why my father left nothing. Whole body destroyed.
Yeah.
My grandmother cried and called my son every day.
Yeah.
My mother can tell her what is your son.
Yes. Yes.
So the life was very, very difficult.
Yes.
Then my mother quit hospital. She was nurse.
Mm-hmm.
She joined the resection the orphan, war orphan,
Yes.
to the saved place.
Mm-hmm.
She lead 200 kids,
Wow. Yes.
run day by day, night from town to town.
Uh-huh.
If we lucky, we get 1 meal a day. If we lucky,
Yeah.
when we run, we saw dead people. Sometimes lose leg, the house burning
Yes.
down, and a lot of people dead. A lady, young lady, no pants.
Yeah.
We saw everything.
Yes.
By that time, we are so young.
Nanjing, you're 3 years old now.
No. But
Yeah.
by that time, 4 years.
4 years
Yeah.
old. But
We-
you can just
Very young.
remember. Yes.
But the first few days,
Consciously, yeah.
we cry,
Yeah.
and a lot of orphanage often cry, asking mother. You can't believe how difficult.
Yes.
We climb the body, dead body,
Yeah.
and you can't believe. We drink the river water
Yes.
with human blood.
Really.
Can't believe.
Yeah.
So that's
Awful.
why we're so sad.
Yes. Yes.
Now we put in this situation. We are not want to create another war.
Yeah.
Just let the people know how difficult the past. We try to unite together
Yeah.
for our future.
Yeah. And it was a horrible thing that you lived through. And you were orphaned
Right.
by that. Your mother, did she?
Right. She was a nurse in the work in the hospital.
Yeah, yeah.
After that, she quit the hospital, lead the war orphan
Yeah.
to back to save the place.
I see. Right. But your father was.
What? Yeah.
Yeah.
By that time was so difficult.
Yes.
I was lucky after Japanese lost the war.
Mm-hmm.
We back to hometown. My Tim Chiang Kai-shek and former President Chiang Kai-shek
Yes.
opened the orphanage school to create build up those orphans. So I was lucky, go into school and they take care of us.
Yes.
Otherwise, we never have today.
Boy, what a horror! Yeah. Now, and so we are, and we didn't have a chance to say at the beginning. We have two film clips that we want to show in the course of this program, and one of them is going to be one that we want to come up to now. This might be a good time to do it, which is some historical footage of newsreel footage and footage of the situation as it occurred. It was a horror. There are reports of up to 300,000.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, that
Yes.
were ruthlessly
Over
decimated
300,000,
over a
right.
3-month period, and we can come back and elaborate on that. But maybe if we could set it up and we could go to that historical film footage now, and then we'll come back. And I remind you, we're talking with Sam Chen and Dr. Howard Zwing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A war orphan from that period. But if we could set that up in studio and run that tape now, and then we'll be coming right back. Thank you. Okay.
But these two peoples, beloved by the McGees, the Chinese and the Japanese, were to be engaged in terrible combat. In July 1937, Japan invaded China. This began an all-out war in which casualties would be innumerable. The Japanese army encountered unexpected resistance in Shanghai. After a long battle, they occupied the city and marched on to capture Nanjing, the capital of the Republic of China. The Chinese army retreated before the enemy had arrived, and the mayor left the city to the Committee of the International Safety Zone, an organization formed by eminent Westerners. Refugees swarmed to the safety zone and built shelters. From December 13th, 1937, to the beginning of February 1938, the victorious Japanese soldiers raped the city. They committed some of the cruelest atrocities history has ever recorded. Reverend John McGee, an American citizen, had various traveling permits from the Japanese military authorities. One of them indicated that photography was allowed. He recorded many incidences.
During this period in 1937, my mother and my brothers and I were in England, and my father was in Nanjing. And the only way he could communicate would be by mail. December 17th. The horror of the last week is beyond anything I've ever experienced. I never dreamed that the Japanese soldiers were such savages. It has been a week of murder and rape, worse, I imagine, than has happened for a very long time. They not only killed every prisoner they could find, but also a vast number of ordinary citizens of all ages. Many of them were shot down like the hunting of rabbits in the streets. There are dead bodies all over the city, from the South City to Shaoguan. I myself saw hundreds of dead bodies in Shaoguan. If you will understand that many of the foreigners in town are having the same experiences daily, and then remember that the same thing is happening in 100 places where there are no foreigners to see, you can imagine the horror of these days. Such sights as I have seen in the Drum Tower Hospital today. The dead body of a little boy, age 7, who had been stabbed by a bayonet in the abdomen 4 or 5 times, and whom they were not able to save. 2 men were registering, both of whom had been bayoneted by Japanese. One showed me a vicious wound in his neck. I saw a little girl of 10 who was standing with her mother and father near a dugout in our refugee zone, watching the Japanese soldiers enter. They killed the parents and gave this girl a horrible stab wound in the elbow, which will cripple her for life. A few days ago, while at the university hospital, I saw a boy, 13 or 14 years old. The Japanese soldiers had beat him with an iron rod, and then I think ran a bayonet through his ear. most awful cases are those of men bayoneted or shot and then set on fire with gasoline. One was the owner of a small boat at Shaguan. His body was scorched black. But the most horrible thing is now the raping of the women, which has been going on in the most shameless way that I've ever known. Yesterday in the hospital, I saw a woman who had been stabbed in a number of places and her head almost severed. She had been taken with 4 other women from the University of Nanjing by Japanese who said they needed to have some women wash for them and serve them. She herself and the others had worked in the day and then were raped from 10 to 20 times at night. One day, 2 soldiers told her to follow them, and they took her to an empty house and there tried to cut off her head. She has a perfectly horrible cut in her neck, and the marvel is that she is still alive. There was also a woman, 19 years old, who was with child for the first time, 6.5 months pregnant, and who resisted rape. She was jabbed in about 7 places on her face and almost 8 places on her legs, as well as a deep stab of about 2 inches in the abdomen. It was this that caused her to lose the baby. They will save her. I think I've said enough of these horrible cases. There are hundreds and thousands of them. It's like a horrible dream, and when I wake up at night or in the morning, it is horrible to find out that it was not a dream. How long, oh Lord, how long? It seems perfectly awful to repeat these ghastly tales, but I think a record ought to be kept so that the unvarnished truth will be known. My father left in 1938, smuggling movies out with him. Well, he would go around and give lectures in churches and to various groups in this country and in England to show people what was going on.
The media published many photos extracted from it. John McGee became the pastor of St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., which President Roosevelt attended. Later, he was summoned to Tokyo to be a key witness at the Tokyo military trial concerning the Nanjing Massacre.
What is your name? John Gillespie McGee. Were you in Nanjing throughout the month of December 1937, January and February 1938? I was.
And he used this very camera to take the pictures of the Nanjing atrocities.
For more than half a century, David McGee had this footage in his basement. Half a century is a long time, long enough for memories to fade, and even for some historical facts to become distorted to suit political interests. Even a record of an atrocity can be altered or simply dismissed. In Japan, this period of history has been presented to the young with an obvious effort to obscure the dark side of the war. The newly published Japanese high school history textbook states, the war, which lasted 15 years, took about 3 million lives. It ended with defeat and the collapse of the Japanese Empire. The text totally discounts the loss of life in other countries. 15 million lives in China alone. Regarding the Nanjing Massacre, the text says, toward the end of 1937, Japan occupied the Chinese capital Nanjing. Since the Chinese national forces withdrew to Chongqing and continued their resistance, the Japanese government's attempts to negotiate a peace failed. It conveniently avoids the whole issue of the atrocities committed by Japanese soldiers. Furthermore, the well-known Japanese writer, member of parliament, Shintaro Ishihara, co-author of the bestseller, The Japan That Can Say No, states in an interview with Playboy magazine regarding the rape of Nanjing in 1937. People say that the Japanese made a Holocaust there, but that is not true. It is a story made up by the Chinese. It has tarnished the image of Japan, but it is a lie. But David McGee disagrees.
Anybody who's seen my father's movies of the atrocities in Nanjing would know from those movies that it did in fact happen.
The McGees are not the only ones who disagree with Ishihara.
That's horrible
Yes.
footage. It truly is, and you know, it's a horrible experience. There's something unique. It's been there, and yet it seems to be among the Japanese people or among the world in general. The horror of what took place there in Nanjing in that period seems to have been buried in history or in the psyche or consciousness of people. The recent book, maybe I can show it here, we'll show it in detail, called The Rape of Nanking. We'll just show it briefly here, and then we can show it by Iris Chang. It's called A Good Deal of Attention to This Issue.
Yes.
And so forth. And your organization, which has been over a long period of time,
Yes.
wants to call attention to it.
Right.
Why is it, do you think, that particular atrocity was buried or attempting to be buried by the forces that be that write world history?
Well, I have nothing to do with Nanjing, actually. I was born in Nanjing, or I only recently visited there.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we got involved is actually go back to 1970s,
Mm-hmm.
when Japanese start to rewrite their history.
Mm-hmm.
They, instead of say what happened, what they did in Nanjing, now they are changing their tone. They just entered Nanjing, and the reason they enter into the war with the Asia country, Pacific Asia country,
Mm-hmm.
is because they trying to rescue the Asian country from the white colonialism.
Mm-hmm. Well, there had
Yes.
been that problem of imperialism and Western
Right.
colonial powers and
So
British and so forth had been there, right?
They try to what they're trying to do is make the war become their rescuer instead of their aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so in 1974 is when I start getting involved in these things. Okay, we start to read a lot about it, and we start to follow through what the story is.
Yeah.
And then in 1985, we were about 10 years before actually start doing something, so we formed an organization.
Mm-hmm. The Alliance.
The Alliance was formed afterwards. We
Yeah.
formed the organization to try to make more get a group of people together to study what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in Asia, because
Mhm.
that time I was young. I wasn't even born in 1937. I was
Mhm.
born 2 years after.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly I did not realize what's going on, and as a Chinese, I start. We learn a little bit about it, but I didn't know all the detail.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So what happening is, as we get more involved, we learn more about it, and we feel that something had to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we form a sub-organization called Alliances in Memory of the Victim of Nanjing Massacre
Yeah.
to concentrate on the Nanjing Massacre issue.
Do they deny the fact that it happened in Japan and in the psychology of the Japanese people? There was a film that I've seen where there are young people in Japan who do not even know that anything
Yes.
happened, and so what.
Yes,
Whereas the atrocities that, let's just say, for instance, the atrocities that took place in Nazi Germany
Mhm.
are very, very well chronicled.
Yes. Right.
Auschwitz and so forth. They were very well chronicled at the horrors. And again, remembering that the war itself in the 20th century has been particularly horrific, right? But they seem not to have done that. Did it have anything? And they often say there's a saying that the victors write the history. Do you understand what I
right.
mean?
Right.
And that sort of thing. And that sort of thing. And but the Japanese had lost in the Second War, ultimately the United States. But the United States had very, very quickly shifted their alliances from the Chinese that they'd been involved with against
Yes.
the Japanese
Right.
to the Japanese being their ally against the
Right,
communist Chinese.
right.
So do you think that had anything to do with the influence of the American people, the American government and forces in the United States and propaganda and media forces
Yes.
saying, let's not look at China now, let's not say China was violated because China now is the enemy, and it got complicated because of that? Or do you understand what I'm getting at? Is there something to that be
it's
said
a
for
very
that?
complicated issue
Yeah.
because after the World War II, the then nationalist government, which is Kuomintang,
Yes.
was pushed to Taiwan.
Yes, by Mao Zedong.
And Chinese communists took over the whole mainland.
And so the Chinese became the American enemy.
Right. So
Very quickly.
instead of,
I mean,
right.
they were our friend and then they were our
Right.
enemy.
So you know, so whatever happened,
Yeah.
it become, you know, like you mentioned, that China, instead of the ally, it become the enemy.
Yeah.
So so they needed Japan because they started the Korean War, as you know.
Korean War happened, and they were building.
And U.S. government was occupied Japan for, you know, kind of like a super government for a while.
Yes, absolutely. It was
right.
occupation, yeah.
So, you know, they used that as a base to carry on the Korean War. So they become very close.
Allied.
Yeah, allied. Right.
Yeah.
It's quickly switched. That's the reason U.S.
Nanjing
government
was swept under the carpet.
Yeah, right.
You think? Yeah.
Yes, of course, definitely.
It had to do with America, and it should be brought out.
Yes, it should be brought up and was a cover. And when we, well, you know, I come from Taiwan, you know, Republic of China, and, you know, in our textbook definitely tell us about it. So when we start realizing the people in the rest of the world doesn't know anything about it, or even somebody is trying to rewrite the history, we become very, very surprised. And the reason to make us to form that alliance is an article shows in a very popular United States magazine. Is in Playboy. You know how many readers this Playboy is.
Yes.
What's the order of the name?
Of a book?
Ichihara Shintaro.
Yeah.
He's
Japanese.
He's a Japanese.
And he said it didn't happen.
Right. Yeah, he's in their Congress person. It's called Date in Japan, and he's a very powerful person. He's a kind of like you know a politician leader of you know.
And they took this position that it did not happen, and people would want to do that.
Well, they're actually saying that the Nanjing Massacre was a fabrication by a Japanese together with the United States government. So, and you know, we think if this article published without somebody to correct that, people think it is.
Yeah, I know. Well, and there's been some activity, and it seems to me, if I may, that in the popular conscience of the United States, this book that Iris wrote, Iris Cheng, which has been on the best-selling list for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years now or something, has really focused attention of the American people on this event as a singular thing that...
it seems to be like we discovered the tragedy.
And if I may, then, this continues among some of you here, the Chinese here and so forth, that continues, and you've had speakers and so forth, and we have some film footage of some events that's been taking place.
Have that,
and I think...
Well, that's not the most recent ones. Before that, we did a lot of work. Including the footage you just saw, the footage. We discovered that film, original 60mm film, in the basement of David McGee, which his father was John McGee, and he was a ministry person in Nanjing at that time.
Yeah, McGee's statement.
Yeah, McGee's, that's the film we used the footage to make the 2 films. One is McGee's Testament, one is In the Name of Emperor, which is we used based on this footage. And that footage was discovered in 1990. And then and Miss David McGee was so generous, not only did he donate the film to us, he also donated all the money for us to help us make the film.
And his father had been a missionary.
Yes.
I think. Episcopal, I think.
His father was actually
and was a good man and experienced it firsthand. But what I was saying is that some of that film, and we had some of the film that we saw earlier in the program, about the atrocities of the events of 1937.
right.
But I'm saying now, there's been chances where Iris Chang has talked to people, other people have, and we have some footage that's been shot more recently that we want to show upcoming.
Okay.
And this is footage that has been done by some of, it's not MGM exactly, but it's people, and we're going to have footage that is going to show some of the more current ongoing activities by the people, the Alliance, and by the people that have an interest in this. And the feelings do run very, very deep and very, very
now there's a
profound.
lot of people talk about it, and you know, more people talk about it, so there's still not enough. So there is coverage of not only Nanjing anymore. Nanjing just one of the things being very, very, you know, big tragedy. But they also, the other issue was in the tape also.
Yeah.
You know, we have a panel discussion just happened, just held on June 28th.
Well, we're going to show that now then in the tape. We have a tape upcoming now.
Okay, showing that.
So
then
we might
then
show
we
and
can
then
discuss
some with Iris Chang also, who was the author of this very well-known book. We've got a commitment from Iris to do a program down the line a little bit about her book when she's in New York. We want to do, she's a very prolific writer. I mean, the writing is very good and the book is recommended and so forth. But we have some footage, some of which speaks for itself in a certain sense. There are events that have been taking place here. And what we want to do with this footage is to give the people a sense of the ongoing activity that's involved around this. So why don't we run that tape? It runs about, I guess, about 10 minutes or a little bit or something like that.
Yeah, right.
We'll run that tape then and we'll come back and we'll round out. And I remind you again, we're here talking with Sam Chen of the Alliance for the Memory of the Victims of the Nanjing Massacre, and with Dr. Howard
Yeah.
I have a difficult time with that. We'll call you Mr. Smith. You know, that's your name. All right. Here, and we'll be coming right back. But if we could set up that tape and run it in the studio now, then we'll be coming right back. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. We'll be coming right back.
Thank you.
Here comes the tape.
Are we to take Sato's statement as the voice of an individual, and therefore it has nothing to do with what the Japanese government said, or is this something that the Japanese government endorses? After all, Sato is the ambassador to the United States, and he is on this soil supposed to be an official voice of the Japanese government.
You who were here this morning, you know that I made a point about the relationship between good memory and bad history. And I'm advocating that we try to do good memory and good history together. One of the tactics of the Japanese revisionists and of Japanese officials is to select one or two photographs or facts or evidence and fasten on that. This is normal, not just for Japanese revisionists, but they fasten on that and they say this is inaccurate, this is wrong. And because of that, the book is whatever you said it was. Full of lies. Full of lies.
Even if they don't have any evidence in the photos.
No, it's worse than that because, to my mind, it's worse than that because they shift the attention from what I was saying this morning, from the core, from the center of the argument, to disputing little pieces of evidence, which can always be wrong even if you're right. And that it's our job to explain that history is not made up of one piece, little piece, this piece. It's made up, it's a gestalt, it's a constituted picture. And if you keep on that, there is no possibility to deny the rape of Nanjing. Now, those of you who know the history of Holocaust denial in Europe, which they now, by the way, in France have decided to call negationism instead of revisionism, because they want to be sure that that revision is too general a term, that those who negated the Holocaust, they went through the same sort of argument. Show me the gas chambers, all right? Now, in Holocaust memory, we're beyond that now, because we have a gestalt, we have a picture of the atrocity that we all generally agree on, and when you're a negationist, you are automatically outside that area of consensus. We need to build on the question of the rape of Nanjing, or on the question of Unit 731. We need to build that gestalt. Now, Iris has gone some way to do it. Now, of course, there are things in Iris's book that somebody's going to find are wrong. That happens to all of us. We can't let them shift the argument. They did the same thing in Japan about the Raba Diary. Those of you who are here and know about the Raba Diary, the diary of you know, in Japan their response was to try to find small things that were wrong or small objections so as to deflect or divert our eyes from the big picture, which of course is nothing new. It's simply more and more horrifying evidence that adds to the same kind of evidence we've had since 1938. So my comments this morning about good history and good memory would make demand that our response be, as Iris just said, our response is, don't give us counter-evidence. Our response is, what are you saying? Are you saying that the Japanese army did not commit atrocities in Nanjing? And if you say that often enough, see, I mean, they can't say that. And Psycho didn't say that.
6 academics did.
Well, wait a minute. Those are the revisionists, and they are the ones who are using evidence in just the way I've just told you. If you read what they say, you'll see that they are trying to undo the good that your book has done and others have done by focusing on numbers. That's what I said this morning. This business of comparative atrocities and how many numbers, they deflect the attention from the atrocities, from the responsibility.
No matter how much evidence.
It's not a question of evidence. You see what I'm trying to say? If you use only evidence, then you are not, then you are playing into their hands. Manipulating. So we have to balance. Obviously, evidence is the heart and soul of what we do, and we have victims' voices, which are one kind of evidence. We have documentary evidence. We have photographic evidence, right? But we also have a received memory now of 60 years long that we kind of know what happened in Nanjing, don't we? And if we don't know every single last detail, that does not absolve us either of historical or moral responsibility. So this is a good opportunity for me to make the point I made this morning. Thank you.
There has to be a groundswell from the public. And if you don't have that groundswell from the public, I think it is unrealistic from the things that I have read about Japan. The emperor being a sun god, the royal family protected by the court, not enabled to speak about what they feel. The current empress, once having had a nervous breakdown because she was not permitted. The heir apparent, the heir to the throne, is married to a very educated woman who lived in the West and was chosen exactly for her abilities. Now her appearance, her clothes, her attitude, she's stifled. How can you expect the emperor to be an apologist when they are so shielded?
Wait a minute.
Not you, I mean...
Okay, but let me just quickly say that no one expects the emperor to do this apologizing, all right? I think it's very important, I tried to say that in another point I made this morning, the importance of oppositional memory. All of these countries that have made any progress in this have made progress because of a memory that was activism that was in opposition to the consensus. Sometimes the consensus was simply silence. Sometimes it's taboos. Sometimes it's in some countries it's quite ideologically rigidly enforced. The point is that it's not a groundswell. What happens is that with enough groups push, for very different reasons, I may say, not because they want the same thing at all, enough groups push through for certain aspects of the memory, then there is not a groundswell, but there is a breakthrough. Now, there are groups pushing, what I said this morning is we must make common cause with the groups in Japan that are pushing in the direction of a more responsible memory. Let these people who come all the way across the ocean to tell us about what they're doing. These are the good guys. There's lots of good guys in Japan. Are they the majority? No. Are they going to deal with the imperial household? No. I don't care about the crown princess. They can lock her up. That's their business. I don't care about Princess Di. They can do what they want with her. The point about this is that this is a question of it's a social question. It's a popular question. As I say, it has to do with democracy and the peoples who experience it. The only people who are ever going to prevent this happening again isn't the emperor. mind you, this kind of thing could happen tomorrow because it's the people who are going to do it. Yes. So I want what you read in the paper and what you hear about the emperor system, remember that our friends here are fighting several battles at once. And some of the battles they're fighting are domestic. Yes. All right? They're fighting, they're having, and so when they talk about the emperor system, that's one kind of, means a whole series of things. What was that? We're all different cultures. That doesn't get us anywhere. But when they say the emperor system, they know that it stands for an awful lot of things, like repression of freedom of expression that he just talked about. It doesn't stand for the emperor and the empress and the crown princess. It stands for the system, and that's why the word emperor system is important, not just the emperor's war responsibility. And it is fighting for freedom of expression. It is getting the media to do their job. It is these sorts of things. Now, these are problems that all of our countries, however democratic they think they are, have in common. And so I just want to, I repeat myself by saying we must make common cause with the oppositional memory that exists in Japan and has existed for a very long time. And in fact, I'll say one more thing, but you've heard a lot about Japanese revisionists today. One of the things the Japanese revisionists are angriest about and are fighting the hardest against is this oppositional memory on the left that's been there for 50 years, and they're sick of hearing it. Now, that's a completely domestic issue. So make common cause with oppositional memory. Don't lump all Japanese together. I wasn't here when Mr. Yoshida said it, but I'm glad you did. You'll never make progress that way. No, but I'm saying, what you read, you don't. When you fasten on the emperor, you're fastening on the wrong end of society.
Well, that gives a sense of what's going on currently, and this issue is a big one. It's not only Nanjing, but the lessons of Nanjing have world implications in terms of we ought not, Santiana, I think, said, if we do not remember history, we're doomed to relive it.
Right.
And I suppose that rings true to you, Dr. Howard, too, that we need to have a sense of remembrance of these things in order to better plot our way into the future.
Yes. Also, I remember one thing.
Yes.
I would like to, as I'm an army orphan.
Yes.
What I was feeling when I was very young, when I started go to kindergarten.
Yes.
My schoolmate come to the school all accompanied by the parents.
Yeah.
They hug each other, laughing, so warm of my schoolmate.
Yes.
I'm the only one accompanied by mother-in-law.
Yes. Yeah.
By that time, I have deep feeling. I lost my father. I know father is important to me.
Of course.
Then when the class started, the first words I talked to the teacher, I said, please show me how to write Papa, father.
Yeah. You're 4 now,
right,
5. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you're youngster. Yeah.
6 years old.
Yeah,
when I go to kindergarten.
Yeah.
I asked the teacher, first words, tell me how to write Papa. The teacher told me, she said, class not study yet. We tell you later. I teach you later. I insist right away. Then she tell me how to write Papa. After that, I back to my sheets. I write Papa, first page, second page, and I cry in the class.
Right.
The schoolmate, oh yeah, doesn't know what's happened. The teacher come to ask me, what's happened to you? I can't say anything, but just cry. Papa, I need a Papa, Papa.
Yeah, right.
Then he can't stop me. I remember very well. If anybody has parents or has warm family together, never feel this, never have this kind of feeling. Then the teacher called my mother from the hospital to the school. He asked her, what happened to him?
Yes.
My mother asked him, told him the whole story. The teacher and the whole class cried. Then the teacher become my godmother. The whole school made it warm up. They give me a large hug, and they said, whatever you need, just let us know the parents. That's what I'm first feeling. Lose the father.
Right. Yeah, that's a very poignant.
It's very cool.
Right. That's a very poignant and personal story.
Yeah.
And the you know, we can sometimes get lost in large numbers when we talk about war losses and deaths. But each loss is a serious personal loss, and that we should remember that, and particularly where the barbarity of what took place. It was not. Again, I want to underscore the case of Nanjing. it wasn't a matter of rampaging soldiers who got out of hand or something. It was a matter of policy in order to terrorize,
Yes.
as a matter of policy,
Yes.
the Chinese people so that they would lay down their arms. There were only, what, 20 million in China or Japan at the time or something? They were trying to conquer a large area where they would not have the support of the people around them, and so it was an active work of terrorists that they were, a tactic that they were trying to instigate. And do you think it's relevant for the lessons of Nanjing to remember that, against the atrocities that have been carried out against other peoples throughout history, that we ought well to bring that up? We mentioned earlier the atrocities of the Nazis against Russian and Jewish and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's been remembered. There's been others, the Armenians and others and so forth. Do you think that it's good, or do you think if we look at that in a broader tablet, we undercut the significance of this particular one? Or is there a universality lesson to be learned from the situation in Nanjing, beyond Nanjing, do you think, that ought to be relevant to other people, beyond the people that
I think so,
in
because
China?
up till now, massacre type of killing.
Yes,
is
and the
still
terrorism on a
Right.
state policy level
Yeah,
is a horrible
and
thing.
I think the people, if we can let the Japan get away with this type of behavior, and I think it really did not teaching the people in the world anything. And I think we should let the people on this type of conduct behavior is not permitted and it should be condemned. And that's why I think it's important to let the people know about things about Nanjing and things beyond that.
Holocaust study.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
Jewish people,
Yeah.
keep on bringing in, and they were teaching the people this is definitely not permitted.
Yeah.
This is a terrible thing to do it. So I think it's important that to let the people know there is other side of the thing. The war is also happening, but nobody mentioned it. Nobody.
Now, what would you say if I were to say that the war, the Second War in particular, that when the United States firebombed Dresden and killed hundreds of thousands, they're very, very ruthless. The fighting techniques of war, war in itself is hell.
Yes.
Now, particularly because it targets civilians now in a way that traditionally they had not. They used to fight the soldiers off in the field somewhere, but now it's the civilians. The war itself is hell. Well, Vietnam, millions were killed. The country of Libya, which has had half their population ruthlessly decimated with concentration camps and so forth, the Armenians and the Jews and that sort of thing. That it's a universal declaration. There should be some sort of a universal declaration against the barbarity of state-directed terrorist policy against any people anywhere. Should be something that should be focused on by the United Nations and the whole world. Do you not think something along those lines?
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think it's important to bring the things out, and if people admit it, or at least they're aware of what they did, and be conscious about it, I think it's important. But what we really try to do is to make Japan, and especially his government, not the Japanese people, like you say, on the last panel discussion, we have a friend from Japan come over to talk about it.
Yes, they have come.
Yeah.
Yes, they have.
Yes. So this is something, we think is important. As long as the people are aware of this type of thing is not permitted, and this type of thing is not the right thing to do, which is fine. But what Japan trying to do now is to try to cover up.
They're trying to cover
they
up.
try very hard. And when this book came out,
and they because they were trying to dehumanize the Chinese in the war by that action.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I would say in the case of the United States, we're trying to, I'm sorry, but I think the numbers of people, the Vietnamese that were killed by the United States action in Vietnam is something that ought to be brought out.
Yes. I mean, whatever the thing like this, wherever it happened, it should not permit it.
That's right.
It should be bringing it out. Yes, so the war, there's a casualty in the war, but what type of war and how the people behave when they're doing the things.
Yeah.
Killing the people, especially killing the civilian, rape the woman, kill the kids.
Yeah.
That's very inhuman.
Yeah, and we can't allow it, and we can't allow stories like Dr. Howard's to. I'm sorry, we're running right out of time. Sorry, there's not enough time.
Yeah, like now the situation, war situation, that everybody have normal life. Cannot figure out how cold the war. So this time, the two Japanese refused to come to United States. I'm wondering, they know they made a mistake. They tried to come to United States, tell everybody the true story of they use human as animal for the human medical research.
Yeah, and for bayonet practice.
Right, for the research.
Terrible, barbarism.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
We are human beings.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially the United States.
Yeah.
Is leader of Democrats.
Right.
And the free country. Why refuse they come to say sorry and to apologize, to tell the true story for the whole world?
Yeah, right.
I don't understand.
Yeah, and some people want to block the people
Exactly.
from Japan coming here to do it.
Exactly. That's
because
right.
they don't want to do it, and that's an important thing.
Exactly.
And it should be one thing we have to guard against, if I may say, this is speaking as an American, we're all Americans and everything, but as American citizens, we have to be careful that we don't allow America to be off the hook to the degree that they have. We did have slavery until very, very recently. We didn't let women vote until 1920. I mean, there have been a lot of horrors that we should cover up, but these kind of, I don't want to trivialize. You can hardly trivialize the interpassage and some of the things that happened in the name of slavery, but it's a longer historical pattern. But the horrors of the 20th century and the war, the use of terrorism, is something that really has to be brought to focus, and I'm sure it's psychologically good that we do address these things, and I congratulate you very much on the work. I think it's very much in keeping with James Joyce, who was one of my favorites, and also I think Nietzsche said that history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. And it might be well that we look at the nightmare and then perhaps awaken to a better day.
We have to
we only
face
got
it.
a few seconds left.
We have to preserve the truth, and we are not trying to cover up.
That's right, not cover up.
Yeah,
this can be
that's what we're
prevented.
trying to do.
Right, right. You're doing that in the case of this Nanjing, and you could join forces with other horrors that exist around the world, and they ought to be brought out from under the rock, and not be allowed to be just a matter of political expediency.
No,
in terms of
that's why we have a lot of Japanese friends join us.
Yes, indeed, including the peace movement and others that want to begin to get into it. Well, it's a huge subject. I congratulate you both very much on the work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I may, I'd remind you that you've had the pleasure. We've been talking with. I'm sorry we run out of time, but there's not enough. But it's Sam Chen, and he is the chairman of the Alliance in Memory of Victims of the Nanjing Massacre. And on my far left is Dr. Howard Shing. I'm getting there. Shing. Okay. And he is unfortunately, but he is a Chinese Army orphan from that very period. Was actually there in 1937. The book is a tremendous read, Iris Chang, so we look forward to welcoming her to the program in the not-too-distant future. That's it for now. Thank you very much for viewing. We invite you to tune in again next week. We on Conversations will be coming back then. Until then, gentlemen, thank you really very, very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Until next time. So, you want to keep the thing going? I'm looking forward to seeing Iris since she comes.
I hope that too.
I should be here September, right?
I think she said, I'll be in touch with her. I got her email and so forth. And I think we're able to get the web address for you on there, so people can maybe, this might help.
You know, that professor in Columbia University, Carol Glock, is very, very good.
Really?
She's
what is her name?
Carol.
Carol Glock?
Carol Glock.
Glock, okay.
Glock. G-L-U-C-K.
Maybe we could be in touch with her with Monica. Monica's in touch with Columbia. Monica Chang.
I don't know. Well, she's very close.
In the walk, Anyway, it was good, and we'll be able to, get that all together. I'm glad you could get here, and we want to keep touch with people that are the ongoing things. As I say, I was at the Asia Society yesterday. There could be room within the Asia Society for these kind of things, and
there's
these other groups. And you say there's people up in Columbia.
There are other things going on there too. So.
And we had a lot of help from Monica Chang, who is in touch with the media departments and so forth.
So
at Columbia.
you specialize in certain type of topic?
Or? No. I'm myself personally. I'd be happy to have coffee. Okay, we're out. That's a wrap.
Okay.
We'll have to get a couple.